Tom Brevoort was given a job that he didn't want and was forced into doing, and forced into making a change to a line that they didn't want to change in order to get back fans and readers, lost readers that they don't want anymore. So whenever they do things to completely sabotage that outcome, they could say, well, you shouldn't have made us change. Now we just lost the Krakoa people, and we didn't get back these lapsed bigot fans that we didn't want anyway, that needed to go away, that needed to go extinct.
Marvel Comics have an entire line of X-Men comic books, way too many teams, way too many comic books, and the lineup itself is spread way too thin, and we're missing some very heavy hitters in there. And this week we learned why characters such as Cable aren't actually making the cut. And here talking about that is the X-Men aficionado, the X-Men historian, Doc.
We get some more decisions from a human-shaped ferret, some explanation for whatever retarded thing he comes up with this time. Yeah, it's about as nonsensical as you would imagine.
Absolutely. Then where is this coming from? Exactly how did Marvel choose which characters would and would not be in X-Men from the Ashes? After all, there are literally hundreds of fan favorite mutants out there. Which of them deserve to relaunch the brand? Thanks to one of Marvel's top editors, we now know, writing in his weekly Substack, Marvel editor Tom Brevoort has been pulling the curtain back on the House of Ideas. In the most recent edition, Brevoort broached the topic of character selection after a fan wrote it inquiring about their own character. And this is very, very important, Doc. While X-Men is a premier franchise, if you get the team wrong, if you don't put in the right characters, you can kill your X-Men book almost immediately.
Absolutely. You need a decent blend of somewhat new, a lot of classic, and a lot of a cool factor. You can have one, maybe two of the more marginally niche X-Men on there, but you need a solid core of classic and cool. And at least two of the characters that they're talking about here, the character that was referenced in the question that prompted this answer was Rasputin 4, who is a new character, does not have any cool factor to them, just another mishmash of existing characters. But the characters that, we're going to be talking about here, both of them have a cool factor that really, really would have fit in well with this incarnation of X-Men if you want to have success.
Yeah, and a lot of people were talking about the status quo, and certainly the status quo of X-Men is important. What are they going to represent? What are they going to overcome? How does the world feel about them? That all kind of informs the world and the stories that you can tell. But it's the team makeup that is the most important thing, and we've got some very important characters missing. This is what Brevoort said. One of my first decrees to all my creative teams as we started things up was that I wanted everything to take place in the here and now, and I wanted it to be digestible for ordinary people who hadn't been following the books for a couple of years. So that meant momentarily sidelining any characters who came from the future or from an alternate timeline or any of that stuff. I wanted a clean entry point, and there's already a ton of baggage from Krakoa that needed to be covered without trying to do alternate future origin or a chimera made from the DNA of 4 other mutants. Even relatively popular characters such as Cable and Bishop were sidelined for this reason. And I think that is nuts because Cable and Bishop weren't introduced within the Krakoa era. If you've been skipping out on the X-Men for the last 2 or 3 years, these are two characters that would likely entice you maybe to come back and check it out because you actually like them.
If you checked out for even the entirety of the Krakoan era, these are characters you know. Cable's been around for 35, almost 40 years now. Bishop's been around for 30 years now. They are as much classic X-Men characters as you can get. Yeah, I mean, Rasputin 4 is a new character with a convoluted future timeline history, but Bishop and Cable are as far from that as you can imagine because they have been around for decades at this point. You're not going to have any confusion on why they're there if you've dipped out on X-Men for the last few years or even where they came from. Really, if you skip the entire Krakoa era, the only thing you're a little bit even slightly confused about is why real Cable's back and Teen Cable is gone. But all you've done is reset to the status quo that people actually liked, which was real Cable.
And the weird thing is we see Tom Brevoort is trying to do X-Men from an Avengers perspective to where they're all solo heroes and they team up. which doesn't make sense for X-Men. It's a team book, but he's trying to do it the opposite way because he comes from Avengers or whatever. There are only so many X-Men characters that can carry a solo book. Wolverine can carry a solo book. Right behind them are Deadpool and Cable, and he's already eliminating one of the characters that can actually carry an ongoing, and going with like Phoenix and Storm and Mystique, and you're going, what Dazzler. Are you thinking? Dazzler, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Cable is as much a tried and true, proven commodity as you could possibly get in this lineup, and the idea of not giving that a solo book, but giving 4 other solo books to characters that have proven time and time again that they can't carry a solo book. I mean, Dazzler got launched at a time where routinely, if you didn't make it to triple digits, your book was basically considered a failure. Storm has managed maybe 12 issues maximum if I think about all of the different solo titles they've tried to launch. Mystique is the closest second to Dazzler. Dazzler had, I don't know, 40 or 50, maybe 60 issues. I don't recall. And Mystique under Brian K. Vaughan got to like 24 issues. And that was considered kind of a success in that Tsunami line era. Cable, his first fucking series, got to about 110 issues before actually Marvel decided that they were tired of paying Rob. So they canceled the book and relaunched as Soldier fucking X. Then it's had trouble keeping an ongoing since then, but every one of those has lasted about a dozen to 40 issues too. And that's in a much more modern era because it wasn't even, the original line wasn't even launched until Art T-Bear took over the book in like 1993. They're cutting their legs off from themselves when they have a proven commodity in Cable. I don't even think Tom Brevoort realizes what he's doing.
Yeah, and Bishop's a cool character as well. Maybe not the established solo character that you could just have an ongoing. Unfortunately, the only thing I can even really remember Bishop doing during the Krakoan era was at Bishop War College. I know he was like one of the Krakoan commanders or everything, but it felt like he was always sidelined. And he's got a good look. He's got a good power set. He's got a really cool, compelling backstory. And if you're going to put fucking Temper on the X-Men team, but you don't have room for Bishop, I think you're nuts.
Absolutely. Bishop would have made a much, much, much more compelling character in that book. I mean, granted, I could almost kind of sort of see the logic of not putting him in there and not really addressing Bishop, because most of Bishop's solo series and his time in the X-Men is addressing how the thing that's happening right now is the thing that caused Bishop's future to come about. But at the same time, you don't have to address that. You can just address it in, hey, we're completely off of my timeline now, so nothing here bears any resemblance, and I can just deal with things in the present as they occur. They don't need to sideline him in order to achieve the goal.
Now, some people may have noticed, and we certainly noticed this, that there is Rachel Summers in the lineup, and Mr. Brevoort does have to provide, a reason for that. Of course, every rule comes with its exceptions, and there was one character to whom Marvel gave a pass despite their complex history. Brevoort stated, "I permitted Rachel Summers to be part of X-Force because she was attached to Betsy Braddock. She's also a long-established character, one that I think you can get into even without needing to immediately mention grew up during Days of Future Past, was a mutant hunting slave hound." So, of course, there has to be an exception to the rule if you're a lesbian.
Yeah.
If Cable was out there sleeping with dudes, he would be allowed into the X-Men because then he would be important.
Yeah, the only exception to the rule here is gay, and that's it. I get that he's trying to get around the fact that the only reason he made this exception is because gay, but this statement here completely invalidates the one that he had just mentioned about characters that, for readers that have dipped out for the last couple of years and want to come back in. Yes, Rachel absolutely is a classic character. She's been around even longer than Cable in a lot of ways. She's just as much of a classic as most of the other characters from the international team. However, If you're trying to make the argument that the reason you're doing this is so you don't confuse readers that might have dipped out for a few years, the fact that Rachel is magically gay with Betsy right now makes your entire previous statement null and fucking void. You're essentially admitting it. You're just not willing to say it, and you're not willing to accept the complete logical fallacy and logical disconnect that your justification made, just because you're trying to get around the fact only reason you justified this is because gay.
And we had a series featuring Rachel Summers that was widely promoted, and they tried to push the book during the later parts of the Krakoan era when Tini Howard just got to restart the same story over and over again with different titles, hoping you wouldn't realize it was the same stupid Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock story. And then the final chapter, was it Knights of X or something stupid like that? Rachel Summers and her are together the entire time. Guess what happened to the sales? They absolutely bottomed out and nobody cared. They cared even less than they did before, and no one cared to begin with. And I don't know why you would attach this to your X-Force book. And you're not going to allow Cable in there because, hey, you're bringing in too many weird stories, but we're going to pull this thing in here that's automatically just going to turn off fans of X-Force.
If you're trying to get the classic fans back, if you're trying to get lapsed readers back, doing something with a book and making an exception for the character that has completely changed, two characters that have completely changed their personality, just because you need to make an excuse for the lesbians being there, it's going to blow up in your face. And when people reject this book as well, don't blame us when your comic book fails. It's destined for failure based on the whole logic and team makeup and personalities you're using, because nobody wants Rachel and Betsy, and nobody wants English Betsy anymore. We haven't for 30 years.
No, somebody's going to come in there like, oh, they're talking about Captain Britain. When's Brian showing up? And then Betsy's going to be like, what the hell is she even doing here? And, oh, now she's got a girlfriend. Oh, it's Rachel Summers. It's Giascani. And you just roll your eyes. You throw the comic book over your shoulder. You're like, yeah, now I remember why I stopped reading X-Men right about the time the Krakoan era started. And they dropped the ball so spectacularly.
Exactly. And all you're doing is setting your book up for failure right then and there from the outset. But you know what? I honestly am not sure that's not the intention. Tom Brevoort was given a job that he didn't want and was forced into doing, and forced into making a change to a line that they didn't want to change in order to get back fans and readers, lost readers that they don't want anymore. So whenever they do things to completely sabotage that outcome, they could say, well, you shouldn't have made us change. Well, now we just lost the Krakoa people, and we didn't get back these lapsed bigot fans we didn't want anyway, that needed to go away, that needed to go extinct. We didn't need them anyway. And now you made us lose these fans. So you made a bad decision because we sabotaged our book.
It almost does feel like Tom Brevoort's sabotaging everything on purpose, doesn't it?
Jordan White is basically his kind of protege, both in personality, editorial style, and utter and complete spinelessness. So yeah, he's just the slightly younger version of Tom Brevoort. Krakoa was Jordan's baby.
I don't get the logic, other than, I guess, maybe Tom Brevoort thinks he's really good at communicating himself out of a corner, or a logic fallacy.
I think the problem with Tom Brevoort is Tom Brevoort thinks that Tom Brevoort is a lot more smart than Tom Brevoort actually is. He made a comment, and anyone, like, I am far from a genius, but I could smell bullshit from a mile away. And his justification for this was obviously undone by his own decision making, and everyone can very plainly see it.
Yeah, they're not letting it go, and obviously we're going to get that within our X-Men #1 review, which is up right now on Think Critical Patreon. Doc Unfiltered, you get the entire recording of this, as well as the review up right now. Link to the video description. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait for the video tomorrow.